Second day of Radio Symposium on Unmanned Aircraft Systems. Please take your seats. Best Practice Forum, Forum 5. We will debate many possibilities of initiatives and measures for safe and efficient operations. We now invite the speakers to come up to the stage as I call out their names. Moisés Petrici, Training Coordinator of Ex-Mobots. Fernando Gabriel dos Santos Nunes, Operations Coordinator. Colonel Jorge Humberto Vargas Sayum, Executive Director of T4 Brunis. Lucas Brianes Fontoura, co-founder of Certifica Drones. Moderator of this forum, Lucas Florencio Queiroz, co-founder of All Drones. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I am Lucas Florencio, co-founder of El Drones, a company since 2017. We work with a project consultancy and certifications of professional UAs. I'd like to thank DECEA and the organizers of this event, especially Colonel Andre, Major Jorge, and all the organizers here from CINDACTA 3 Recife, which is my native city, so I feel at home. For this challenge, I'm a specialist in the area. Usually, I'm invited to speak, and today I'm in a different position as a moderator of this panel. I'm very happy to do so, and it's a great responsibility because I saw that I'm the first civilian to be a moderator, so I hope I can do a good job and make this a dynamic and interesting panel. And for this, I count upon the help of all of you and also those of us following us on YouTube to access the QR code, the platforms, and throughout the presentations, to ask questions that will be discussed at the end of the presentations for the debate sessions. Very well, very well. All new technologies, they raise new discoveries, new possibilities, break of what an interrupt of what had been doing, and independently of the level of automation that this new technology brings, it always starts with on pilot. And here, an addendum, all this in a regulated by ANAC. I'm a accredited examiner by ANAC to examine, to check drone pilots class 3. It was the first accreditation of this kind in Brazil. Very well. In terms of a drone pilot, the question I would like to ask is it possible to operate it legally? Many operations in Brazil happen in irregular, so illegally, or over 400 feet or too fast. It's irregular. You must do it, and they do it. So is it possible to fly legally? And I like to answer this, talk a little bit about my experience with X-Mobots and with X-Pilot, which is our pilot training school. We call it X-Pilot. X-Pilot has training courses for drone pilots manufactured and sold by X-Mobots for its in-house pilots and external pilots. We have over 20 drone pilots in X-Mobots accessing the airspace in different ways. In X-Pilot, we currently have the training pilots for products, for X-Mobots products, pilot, the training for products to fly over 400 feet, the training, remote agricultural spraying courses, and the advanced trainings that we, for the Army, for federal police, and for other agencies. Over 2,000 pilots have graduated from the X-Pilot. X-Pilot is born at a time when we approve the Arator to fly above 400 feet. And here comes the question. Why have a drone that can fly over 400 feet if you don't have pilots that are qualified to legally fly with this equipment? So, X-Pilot was born there to train pilots to take advantage of this equipment to bring out all the potential that the drone offered with this project approval. Very well. So, X-Pilot has a few milestones, some conquests that we had during this period. So we start with the acceptance by ANAC of the first process, the first course for the training of pilots to fly over 400 feet, class 3 pilots. The training of the first pilots to fly over 400 feet with the license and qualifications by ANAC. After this, we had a simplification of the process. The process is totally in-house, internal, from the course to the approval and the checklist. We have the examiner accredited by ANAC. The first examiners, that was a milestone. The acceptance by ANAC of the class 2 pilots training to fly over 400 feet, the first 2 pilots with license qualifications class 2 issued by ANAC, and we have today the 3 pilots also authorized to fly for class 1 drones authorized by ANAC. So these are some of the milestones for X-Pilot. To offer the market a full, complete solution in 2010, we created X-Pilot with these courses that I mentioned to you, with the objective of issuing licenses and qualifications by ANAC. It's an approved work plan by ANAC, the Brazilian Civil Aviation Agency. How was this process of this first license and qualification, this first training of pilots to fly over 400 feet? We had at the time a course about drones, technical knowledge, specifications, manuals. After this, the pilot underwent uh, private airplane pilot had to be approved by ANAC, had to pass a test in ANAC. After this, did a course to fly over 400 feet. Specific knowledge of private pilots applied for flying over 400 feet. And after this, check done directly by an examiner from ANAC came and did the presidential test with the pilots, with the candidates to obtaining this license and qualifications. This process ended in May 2018. In the photograph, we have the next examiner, Henrique, who is our pilot, our first pilot to obtain this license and qualification to fly over 400 feet. Very well. After Henrique's I graduated. We have over four more checking processes, complete checking processes for obtaining license and qualifications. I was part of the second class, and since then I've studied and became an instructor to train the other pilots that came after me. And here, one of my objectives for X Robots was to structure this course, to make it into a school. And here I have how this process took place for X-Pilot today. We have the first stage, which is the velocity to fly up below 400 feet. This candidate undergoes a theoretical course and then a practical course for flying course. Then there's an experience of accumulating flying hours, and then it goes to the airplane private. This was the original process. Undergoes plane, goes for tests at ANAC, then goes for flying. BV laws above 400 feet, theoretical, practical parts, and then the ANAC examiner does the test this pilot. So I took over X-Pilot as coordinator, and the objective was to simplify this process. So it was a milestone we had. We replaced the ANAC test by the course that we call CAPR, the aeronautical knowledge for remote pilots at X-Pilot. And we were able to have the examiner to speed up the process and so forth and to make it more practical. This was a time where ANAC visited the company, the certification, personnel certification agencies and civil agency, aviation civil were there. They saw the process, they went to the field, they checked out the practical classes, and that's where we were able to get this eliminating the ANAC doing the testing and inserting into X-Pilot our own testing process. Here's a comparative between the old and the new process. And the old process, we took us for 7 months to 1 year to train a pilot. Now we do it up to 6 months. The wait, one of the bottlenecks was the waiting for the agenda of the next examiner. Today, we're able to decrease this in half the time. We have our own in-house examiners, and so in a few weeks, this approval can take place with the licensing and qualifications by ANAC. These are the different stages of the process and what changed from one to the other. Very well. This training of pilots to fly over 400 feet, it's not just important for the pilot to be able to use the X-Mobile's products that have authorizations to fly above 400 feet. It's also is in agreement with this moment that we live with since the time of the launching, release of the new legislations where the ANAC proposed this training, and we didn't see any movement by the market for this pilot training. So we took on the cause, and we have been developing this till now, till today. Right at the beginning, I sped up. I still have 5 minutes left, but I just like to repeat the question. From the drone pilots, is it possible to fly legally? Yes, we have equipment that allows for this flight to take place, and we need well-trained pilots. So this, our role is this engagement, train these pilots, to train the professionals, to have access to their space, to share the airspace with the share the space with manned aircraft. We have worked with academia to think about ways to kind of share this responsibility, to embed this responsibility with AI into their aircrafts. But I hope that, I mean, we need always human beings being piloting or air traffic controllers to have the necessary knowledge, the engagement to be able to manage this airspace safety measures. So to answer the question, yes, it's possible to fly. We don't need to do things illegally, just get things done in the dark. We can search for ways to be more professional and to explore this market. Okay, so I still have some time. Thank you. I think that's the message I wanted to share with you. Thank you for talking so fast. Here's my phone, my email. If anyone wants to have more information about this topic, feel free to contact me. Thank you.
It's really important to have this qualification and training of pilots, and you mentioned important things that ex-pilot works with. And imagine doing this, but within an airport. That's the difficulty that Fernando faces on a daily basis. He's coordinator of airports at Zurich, Floripa. You have the floor. Expertise or what we added and bring drones to an airport operations. But before that, I have to tell you how it started. How the airport woke up one day and just wanted a drone. No, we had a process of operations assistant, and we had a mentor. And my mentor was our operations director, Fabio Marx. Fabio, thank you. Fabio, in one of our meetings, came to me and told me or asked me, why don't we have a drone at the airport? I, as operations assistant, that takes someone that takes care of safety operations, and I like, what? Drone in the airport? And Fabio insisted, and we tried to find out. Well, first, what do I need to have clearance for a drone in our airport? We went after that information. We sought what was needed. So, first steps, registered pilots. How can I operate a drone if I'm not registered with an ANAC? I need to be regulated. Drone register. What drone are we going to buy? How do we do it? Insurance, ISO. How am I going to convince our operational security that drone operations in an airport is safe? And it is possible. Flight authorizations and briefing with our DECEA. Lieutenant Leoncio, thank you so much. Well, after all that, we started establishing the process, designing SOPs, working on KOP in all areas, working on all areas that could interfere or make drone operations in our airport impossible. We started by choosing our device. Zurich Airport has in its three airports. I work in Florianopolis Airport, where everything started, the first airport to have a drone in their operations. We chose a Phantom 4 Pro Max, Pro Plus, because of its quality, safety. It has sensors, an extremely powerful camera. It meets our expectations, and it brings an image visualization capacity, regardless if it's photo, video, or the speed it goes. We can have good quality images. That's key. It's not using having a drone that overgoes a runway, but the image is bad or blurred. It does not solve our problem. How did we start working? Well, we went through all the stages. We had meetings with our tower chief, Lieutenant Leoncio. He, to me, instead of bringing difficulties, he brought us solutions, things that facilitated our lives. At any point, we heard you can't or no way. We heard we have to improve this, we have to improve that. That's all we heard. We need to improve. And it truly facilitated our job. Today, we have operations monitoring of the aerodrome area. We do it every 3 months. Inspection of the maneuvering area, the runway, the taxiway. We have daily operations, never at night. At night, we do it as standard. So we do a bi-monthly fencing of the airport, accessway monthly, maintenance, conditions of the paving and the runways, and we use the same images you see for operations, runways, taxiways, maintenance. So you see, only there I reduce access to my maneuvering area. So operational security love that. And if I reduce my flow, runways, taxiways are for aircrafts, not for people or cars. We are there to validate the adequate conditions, but that area is for aircrafts. So, beaming construction works. All constructions works, works are registered. So I have a 1 hour, 2 hours of maintenance in the morning. My drone is there, ensuring things because we need to ensure that we are doing things correctly. So the drone is filming, monitoring, so we have tools and arguments to prove that we use the correct way of working. As GSO, that was difficult. These people were more complicated. We fought hard to get those facilitations from drones, but no kidding, they brought us solutions. We need to improve. That's all we heard. So they did facilitate our job. Runways, taxiway conditions, the run and FO debris. So our drone, with the images we have, we are able to see FO debris, taxiways, runways, patios very easily. Fauna, monitoring of possible points of access. So our fencing, we have the images, the fauna can use these images. It's all stored. Points that attract the fauna and the surroundings. The commercial, we have a boulevard, we have events, we have images to publish at Floripa Airport. We have videos throughout our TPS. So we disclose areas, events, so the drone also helps with these demands. How do we ensure a standard of image? Because if I leave this to the pilot, there's wind, there is some easiness or not to control the drone at that moment. So we created standards of inspection. So we run inspections in runways and taxiways just the same way, the same position all the time. With the system where we created the standardized flights. The operator, the drone operator, only has to push start and monitor. All the time we are in contact with the ATC, the tower. It's the same process as if we had a car. Tower, we request the grant to start the flight, tower, end of flight. So the entire process, all the time, we have direct radio contact with the tower. What is the purpose of this? By keeping a standard, I will always have the same images. Let's say today I've identified a crack, a possible damage to the paving that may expand. Did it come from yesterday, or was it last week or a month ago and nobody saw it? Let's check the images. Let's look. It's here. I know exactly minute 18. So I go to minute 18 of a week ago and I see if that crack was there or not, or if that damage, possible damage in the paving was there or not. So by bringing this standardization, that's the best option we saw to keep the quality and safeguard the team, because the fact you only push play and start and you don't have to control the device, it's very easy to monitor and to have the field of vision for the pilot. We had to split in two parts. The previous one is this part one of our inspection of the main runway, and then we have part two of our main runway 1432. An important detail I want to tell you, it facilitated to our tower. By having a standardized flight, I know exactly when I start and when I finish. Tower starting stage 2 or part 2 of 1432. 4 minutes. So the tower knows exactly when I start and exactly when I end. Is there a flight approach in 10 minutes, but it flies for 4 minutes, so cleared to fly. Facilitated, and it brought agility to the process. It does not create fear to the towers. Are they going to end the flight? Will there be time to land another aircraft? No, it's here. 4 minutes, 2.6 kilometers of inspection. Our program for the auxiliary runway. This is our ZPA, how we deal with the ZPA today. So the drone goes up at our final and takes two pictures in the middle, left diagonal, and right diagonal. All pictures. All pictures of our ZPA have the same standards, same angle, same profile, meaning that I can see ZPA from this quarter. I compare to last quarter. I put side by side. It's easy to see if there was a difference or not. Did anything come up? Is there any area, any building, anything that may interfere with my approach? This is the 14 final. The 03, the faces the neighborhood. After the 03, there is the Tapera neighborhood. Final 21. All with the same angle, same profile. We need to control that. I need to know how or when I can fly, what was identified, what the team analyzed. I have a dashboard for operations control. In each flight, the report authority, our patio supervisor, fills an electronic form, and I immediately get it in the dashboard. I wasn't able to put here, but each information here, let me see if I can point it. But each information here, like this red one here, was not possible to fly. Why? Maybe it was raining or too windy, meteorological conditions, so we are very restrictive in that sense. If the winds are greater than 30 knots, the flight is interrupted. It cannot happen. And we don't expect it to be rainy, so if there is rainfall, also, the flight won't happen. We use the car. Why? To ensure comfort, safety of operations, and also not to create any risks for operators, because it's an electronic device and water may cause something. Imagine it's there in the middle of operations. There is a lot of water. They won't be able to come back so early. The equipment may fall on the runway. So we anticipate this kind of situation. Advantages. The main advantages we identified: reduction and the time of movement of cars in the maneuvering area. So less cars in the maneuvering area, more safety for takeoffs and landings, quick exit of protected area, optimization of field work, low operational cost. That's very important. Large area of reach for inspections and survey of different information in one single flight. So in one single flight, I can have information on the pavement, FOD, the conditions. So one single flight brings me many different reports. So the maintenance coordinator, SGSO, they go there, they see the video of the day, and they see the conditions for their area, for their own needs. Deliver a final material in a reduced time. So they needed to write by hand, very briefly, what they saw, what they didn't see. Okay, operational. No, you upload the video, it's available, and I can easily see. While they write the report, I see the video. I know what's going on. An image database that is updated in high definition and a real scale for a long period. We established a year of storage of these images. The IT of Zurich wants to kill me, but 1 year. For 1 year, these images are stored, and these videos are 2 to 3 gigas. So they are heavy, but we are able to keep that for a year. Overseeing oversights in hard to access areas. So maybe the forest or something that was taken by vegetation, but the drone can get closer. Points of attention. The response time for return to home, it was established. Return to home is very good. It brings it back to the takeoff point as we configured. But we determined a time for that. So the tower is in our KOP. It's very clear to have it aligned that we need at least 3 minutes, 5 minutes, I'm sorry, for the drone to return. Here I was going to show you some flights, but as I told you, the size of the videos made it complicated for us to show you. I'm sorry I'm over my time. Thank you so much. I hope I was able to show you our joy. I won't say difficulty, our joy in having a drone in our operations. Thank you.
Thank you. It's incredible. I imagine the new aviation, drone aviation, how it fits with what you commented. It's incredible how it's similar to hear you talk and hear airline pilot working. You said the word standard, routine, procedures. So this is something that makes aviation is what it is, to repeat, attention to details. However, not all operations are routine. Not all operations are that what we call in a clock. We're able to repeat because there's atypical operations. That's why we invite Colonel R1, Colonel Vargas, founder of T4 Drones, to tell us a little bit about his experience in this atypical experience. Thank you, Lucas. Good morning, everyone. Before getting started, I'd like to ask, if possible, separate paper and pen that you're going to need it. Very well. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Those who are remotely, the same thing. I'm a reserve officer for the Air Force. I work for 30 days. I like, if possible, não, tá dando, there's some problems. Já viu? Now, I worked for 30 years in the Air Force, 17 on CISCAP in the Brazilian airspace control. My education as aviator is fighter pilot and specialized in air special defense. I'm head controller. Many years I worked in CINDACTA 3, so it's a pleasure to come back home, let's say. Some of you already know me for some time, and you know of the some nicknames that I had at the beginning when we started to work with drones in Brazil. So someone is laughing here because he was a crazy man, megalomaniac. He was nuts and etc. But today I am full of joy seeing very competent people here next to me talking about things that the crazy man way back talked about. Lucas has been following me from the beginning, so he helps me to lie. So behind all this, for us to be here today talking about UAs, there's a group that works hard, but this group works in a silent and anonymous manner. And many times, as a military, we are used with being anonymous. We're used to a sentence that we learn in our military school. It says the following: there's no merit in following your duty. And this is true. There's no merit when you follow your duty. We were made for this, but I don't give this up, but to, yes, give thanks to those who came before me and those who are now responsible working for all this to be possible. Obviously, not all names are listed here, but I prefer to be wrong, leaving some names out than to not mention those who were very important to make our work possible. I believe that everyone else has. If anyone here works with drone and their names are not here, please don't get mad at me. Very well. We were taught to talk about multi-drones operations, but instead of talking about multi-drones operations, we're going to talk about these routine operations and atypical operations. Sergio, that's what you asked for, right? Okay. So Sergio had asked for me to talk about atypical operations. And why? Amongst which we're going to talk about multi-drones also. And the main problem that many people that came up here to the stage talk about, and today has been mentioned also, is that this lack of knowledge, the unknown. How are we going to take a citizen that bought a drone that theoretically does everything on its own? It's very easy to pilot. How are we going to talk to this person about airspace class, AAP route, conditioned airspace, rules, aeronautical physiology, and etc.? It's very complicated. If that person doesn't understand that what he or she has is an aircraft, of course. Thanks to this ease of use, many people learn. They are qualified in YouTube. They open the YouTube, and if you list in YouTube how to fly a Phantom 4, it's there. I like this, the Joven looked it up. It's very cool. But there's only one weapon that can bring these new pilots, and not quote-unquote, these new pilots to the aeronautical reality, and this weapon is awareness. Thanks to awareness, we are able to re-educate these professionals, and they are professionals. We're going to see a few things here for they to be able to work in a cooperative manner, searching for becoming more and more professional. This qualification that's necessary, that's been already mentioned by my friend Moises, it's a tool sine qua non that we cannot give up, so that can maintain the proper safety level. And the main weapon is awareness. Well, when we talk about awareness, the Chicago Convention from 1944 already foresaw aircraft without unmanned aircraft. Article 8, right after that, with the appearance and growth of drones, 2008, it was talked about yesterday. Study group for unmanned aircraft is created, and Brazil is part of the study group since 2009. The main objective is to check the impacts on the convention, on the attach and access to the Chicago Convention, to the appearance of drones. But in the whole world didn't have the knowledge. And when you face this lack of knowledge, you have to be ready for everything, for anything. And we have to prepare not just a guide, but we have to have a robust guide, which is DOC 109, the reprise manual, to bring those to join our site. That's why it was seen the huge power of the drone tool. Drones at the beginning came up to replace air models for a very simple piloting. However, with these possibilities of embedding sensors, what this equipment can do, we're going to see a few things in a little while. We can't just forget about it. Those who try to not really pay attention to it, they suffered for this. And those who tried to ban, they also suffered for it. What did Brazil do? We learned with the mistakes of others. We went after, since 2009, Brazil is part of this group, we went after the best standards and parameters used throughout the world. And we brought to our activity these same standards. When this person was called to talk about drones, the truth was just one. Drones accessing, just one reason, the drones accessing the airspace in an undue manner. So drones were treated as threats if they enter the airspace without permission, and not just with UAs, not just with drones, not just, also with manned aircraft, independently of size, independent of reason. But, like I mentioned, Brazil joins the group in 2009. I start to be part of this group in 2012. In 2017, I bought my first drone. When I bought my first drone, and I had access to the power that this tool has, the possibility of use for this tool, I really fell in love with this equipment. And from this time on, the fight for this awareness to be done in a generalized way, in a generalized but not shallow but deep, was a struggle we had for a long time while we were active in the military. Laws and rules. We didn't have to make anything up. Our Brazilian aeronautical civil code already mentions aircraft, and drone is an aircraft, and that's it. Drones are aircrafts by definition. Yesterday, our friend from the trial board came up and had an excellent presentation. Then I'll buy you a beer later. We talked about the fines already listed in the Brazilian aeronautical code. One of the questions that was asked for you, a lack of knowledge and bad faith. Many times, what we DECEA, because I left DECEA, but DECEA is still in my heart. Many times, when we were looked up for an accusation or a complaint, DECEA's objective was never to apply fines to harm anyone. The opposite is true. Our objective, this is to bring professionalism, education, awareness, and it's always been this way, and it will always continue to be this way. So, this professionalization is only possible when we have awareness. However, which tools can we use for working closely to the user? One of the tools is this one, SIRESANT, which happens annually in each regional agency and has had great results. I'd ask you to pay attention to this video.
So we have to find a way of making that work.
Very well, this citizen, great friend. I had the pleasure to work with him in the International Civil Aviation Organization as Brazil's representative. Mike, very well. Awareness, other tools, the DECEA using Saki. So the answers were direct but not automated. Many times we got some calls at DCA saying the following: I don't believe that DCA answered my question in an individual way, in a careful way. I like to thank you for that. Trying to get the understanding from the user. Remember, I talked about awareness, education. One of the first campaigns that were held, drone aware, many different campaigns were held, analysis and assistance, both by the DECEA as well as other agencies involved, ANAC and ATEL, especially as of 2017. This understanding goes both ways. Down here we have some of the first agencies that started to deal with the drone subject matter. But this is very dynamic. So now recently we have another entity coming into play of agencies that deal with equipment. Right. Awareness. Awareness, it seems like a mantra. Purchase this brand. Awareness. Talking about atypical operations, we're going to talk a little bit about multi-drones operations. What do we have? What did we have in the first version of HIBAC? It's a necessary presence of our remote pilot for the RPS operation during all flight phases. One remote pilot can only use one RPA at a time. Okay, great. And then we start to deal with ANACA for different requests from the visual farm company to try to bring multi-drones operations. How? We proved, we showed, we answered all the questions concerning the remote control station. We showed all the contingency actions and all the answers to emergency response. And with that, we had 8 multi-drone operations authorized by the ANAC's board. But this company, after presenting together with T4 the possibility of operating multi-drones with one pilot only, this attitude of collaboration ended up allowing for this flexibilizations for the norm to be done so that one remote pilot continues to operate one aircraft at a time, except if in other ways authorized by ANAC. This was published in this resolution 622. So today it's not necessary to have a meeting of the board to approve this kind of operation. And this allows for this kind of operation, this kind of entertainment, especially after such difficult times that we went through. And thank God we're all here, especially after this phase, we're able to follow spectacles, shows like this in different regions of the country. Very quickly, some statistics. October 2017, we had 61.26% of drones exclusively for leisure, recreational use. Today, we have April 2022. The last data statistics was able to access 56.45. It seems not much, this decrease, but The line here, this dropping, shows possible professionalization of the market. But be careful, because until the last update of RIBAC before the last season, the registry could fly recreational or non-recreational. Registry, this Romeo, which is recreational, was flying exclusively recreational. Today, this registry XXX flies only recreational. So, sorry, non-recreational. So those who have their drones with XXX registration, they probably will have to hire an insurance for non-recreational flights, which is mandatory, this insurance. These numbers here are extremely important, extremely interesting when we analyze them, because I said in 2017 this reback was published. One of the main problems was the lack of knowledge. When we look at this, in 2017, look at the filling of the first registers. These registries are valid for 2 years. After they expire, they remain for 6 months in the data bank, and after 6 months, they are excluded. So, 17 to 19, 2 years. In 2020, a drop of 1,075 pilot registries or operators, and a drop of 415 drones in the systems of the ANAC registry. Because why did the number of pilots decrease? No, because the lack of knowledge still rules, and the pilots did not renew their registries. So once again, the importance of awareness. What is the secret for this awareness? Who are the participants of this awareness? This is a collaborative process between industry, academia, regulators, users, and in a bit larger font, it's not by mistake. The users are a bit bigger. It's not by chance. Public security, the regulators pay attention. Of course, there's the number of levels of decision making. As I said, the International Civil Aviation Organization concerned about international flights and the large aircraft flights, while we have some organizations concerned about the macro. If the regular thinks about dealing with the users and correcting problems is a small things, this is going to lead to problems for sure. And I'm very happy to have had the need to change the slides for these presentations. I even scared surprised the organizers, because thanks to the presentations by DECEA done yesterday in this platform on Captain Sergio, I could see that this level of working closely with the user has increased. Congratulations to the DECEA, because this is going to assure a scalability for this kind of operation, and also maintaining the safe access to the airspace. So the secret for all of this to happen, and now bringing the example asked by our representative from the trial board, complaint done, bodily harm, because resulting from a fall of a UA, a drone. Here in 2017, a regular drone flight in the no-fly zone of the Congonhas airport. They asked here to Lieutenant Eduardo Silva sobre the use of the air traffic violations. This is a document sent and signed by this agency at the time. As foreseen in the ordinance, the DECEA 258, this violation in the article such and such, characterized by the violations of air traffic 04, 08, 11, and 37. This is in the ordinance 208. So there's already this situations. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Very quickly, numberless applications, aero filming, infrastructure, energy, wind towers, airports, Zurich mentioned this. The results are great. This is a air survey done in the Guarulhos airport. This map with this definition for you to have an idea. 25 megas size. This image, the result that's delivered to the final entity is around some gigabytes of information. Safety, security, public security, support to the troops. It was not easy to be able to be part of these situations, but I would do everything again to be able to be proud and to be able to carry this, and a great hug for this prison operations throughout Brazil. Not just supporting the troops, we were talking outside, materiality, the possibility of generating legal proofs for that we can have results of our actions. I was going to talk a little bit about do this exercise, but this simple image, this simple photograph, I was going to describe this image so that you could set up. But after setting up this image, after assembling this image, one photograph at 79 meters height, taken at this height, this image brings us a scenario of 8 collapsed structures, 9 possible victims. I know what would be the possibility of access, difference in altitude between field where I'm at and the affected region, the possible evolution of the scenario, so that I can anticipate and predict. An example, if I fly in a 4-hour intervals and a spot moves 50 meters, it's moving approximately 300 meters per day. If it moves 300 meters per day and I have a city 3 kilometers away, theoretically I have to evacuate the city if this continues to move, so I can evacuate in a controlled manner without panic, without being chaotic. Growth, market growth, that's foreseen. We're talking here about urban air mobility. This is already a reality. Many other kinds of equipments that are being brought into our country to be used here. This has already been shown yesterday by the Airspace Control Department. Airspace, that's not infinite, although it seems that way. So this is Amazon published this some time ago. It's already being seen today in a more detailed way. But again, this demands cooperation, demands coordination and awareness as being the main tool. This from all stakeholders so that we may generate this cycle. Here are some of the products. Don't compare this equipment thinking that you can use it as a toy. So independently of the size of your toys, this is the difference between men and boys. But with aviation, there are no toys. And yes, aircraft. To finish up, I'd like to show you a short video. Zurich is here with me. He presented before me in 2018. I heard in their presentation a pilot, an aircraft, and a manned aircraft, commercial aircraft pilot. In Atlanta Airport, the controller informed there's a drone in the right side of the runway. He gives okay, sees the visual drone and lands. 2018, I thought that we were able to do that. So now I'd like to share with you São Paulo Airport, Congonhas, 20200, runway, main runway 17 to your left, runway condition 0000. NAVS procedure, left runway, taxi runway delta, control drone on the sector, southeast sector of the airport. Thank you. To do this kind of operation in our country should make every Brazilian very proud indeed. I talked to my colleagues yesterday. We did an operation in Parque de Juventude, 600 meters from the runway of the Campo do Marte airport, and were able to bring the results, counting with the great help of the CICEA personnel. Thank you, brothers, and that's it. Thank you before I end up crying here.
Thank you. It was amazing. Well, you mentioned about the awareness of users, the operating aircrafts. Lucas from Certificate Drone. Tell us more about the certification processes of these aircrafts. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to share the stage with such amazing professionals to speak to a very dignifying audience. We are speaking here about aircrafts, professionalism, flight safety, and there is no flight safety without air certification. I am an aeronautical engineer. As Lucas, we have a large experience in tests, essays, and in flight. And I've been working for 5 years for RPA certification. Our idea today is to tell you about certification of RPAs here in Brazil. I'll be speaking about the certification of RPAs in the Brazilian regulatory framework, the types of certificates, the main requirements, and certificates for remote pilots, and the specific case of a project authorization class 2 for agricultural spraying. That's a current topic, a hot topic in ANAC. That's what being changed. The rule is being changed now. So let me speak about the certification first. The aeronautical framework will have two regulators, as you know. The DECEA covers, it has the authority on the airspace, and ANAC is in charge of air navigability, the certification of aeronautical products, of giving clearance to pilots, mechanics, everyone involved in aviation, responsible for the airport infrastructure, the registration of aircrafts, and also oversight. And ANAC works only with the civil area. DECEA covers military and civil fields. Anyone that accesses the airspace is subject to DECEA. Generally speaking, ANAC's made up mostly by engineers and analysts, people that see the technical side, and DECEA looks more at the operational side. And in terms of certification, we also have a military certification organ, IFI. I think it's important to mention IFI. And for drones, for the armed forces, the Air Force, and aircrafts, and for specific military operations, IFI is there for this type of certification. Here in Brazil, before ANAC providing certification for drones, IFI was working in that sense. We have arms and other aircrafts working with the Air Force, and the IFI made the specification and tests as they do with manned aircrafts, and ANAC civil certification for manned and also unmanned aircraft. So they have the authority on air navigability. We have a regulatory scope that is well defined. We have a legal framework The main rule is RBAC E Echo 94 with an amendment 01. We have many documents that guide certification. Not all drones need to be certified. 90% of operations here in Brazil and the world demand are for light drones, small drones, class 3, below 25 kilograms, below 400 feet, and with a line of sight. So this is most of the operations. And with this limiting being limited by the line of sight, light drones, and below 400 feet, an act does not require certification. It needs to certify the drone. It's a flexibilization. It makes the rule lighter so not to limit operations or access to technology, but of course, when you're speaking of heavier devices, or if we have the ability of flying higher or further with a greater potential of impact on manned aviation, then the authority will use its intention to make a technical, detailed analysis and provide the correct certification for your equipment. What are the types of certificates we have? We have authorization for projects for classes 2 and 3, so up to 150 kilograms. And we have a certification of type, the same type of certification used for unmanned aircraft. The certification of type follows RBAC 21 as other manned aircraft, and the project authorization is a more lean legal framework that is used for class 2 and 3 drones. The main requirements here, I'm naturally not going to get into details of 200 pages of requirements, but I just want to give you an idea of what we analyzed in the certification process. Flight manual, according to the rule. Have you read the manual of your cell phone? I bet no one. But most of the drone manufacturers, DJI, they make the manuals on the same format of a cell phone. Just like to, with some questions and then no one's going to read, but here's different. This is aviation. It has to follow a rule of aviation. If an aircraft pilot gets a certified manual, it will have the same format, the same logic, the same format that is known for aviation, that's been over 100 years of maturity, with the normal procedures, emergency procedures, limitations of the aircraft. Everything is there in that methodology, manual and maintenance plan. So you have to think fatigue of components and so on. This will all be mapped and described by the operators. So I have to have a maintenance manual for a certified equipment. Indications, alarms, failure procedures, mitigation of failures. This is all there and must be in the manual, in the safety analysis, in a certification process. There are many reports. I won't get into detail, but there are many reports involving the certification, many technical analysis of each condition. So if this specific component fails, what happens? You have one navigation system, it fails. I lose control of my aircraft and it can go over a densely populated area and collide with people on the ground. No, I gotta have redundancies, backup. I have to have determination of flight systems. These are just some of the requirements we run in a technical analysis of a project during the certification process. External lighting system, it's something they are really on, especially for drones flying above 400 feet. other aircrafts may be able to visualize the drone. And even people on the ground, the observers of RPAs or other people, they have to see. The aircraft have a lighting system, and there is a standard of lighting for drones, just like for normal aircraft. All being able to deal with different failure scenarios. There are many scenarios: loss of link of command and control, navigability loss. I cannot rely only on GPS, because even if I have a redundancy of GPS antennas in the drone, the GPS system as a whole, the satellite, it's a one single system. So if for some reason the satellites are inaccessible and I lose my capacity of navigation, I cannot rely on that. So I have to have redundancies or a way of ending my flight in a safe manner. These are some superficial examples that we analyze in a certification process. So the habilitation for remote pilots, we've spoken a lot about the criteria. But here in Brazil, any operation above 400 feet or drones above 25 kilograms, the pilot must be certified, must be licensed. So each project with an authorization also must have a license associated. In the specific case of agricultural spraying, ANAC realized that there's a greater demand for class 2 in agricultural spraying. So I brought a brief history. Class 1, 10 liters for spraying have been in the market before 2019. They become very popular. They started growing. You see 16 liters, 20 liters, 30 liters, and now we see a growth in popularity for drones with 40 liters of capacity, cargo capacity, and they weigh 100 kilograms. They operate at a low altitude in a well-controlled environment, away from people. So ANAC realized, well, maybe do we need to put a burden on this use, and with all this complexity of certification for equipment that is away from aircrafts and people flying at low altitudes in a rural environment. And then came the proposal to change the rules, simplifying the process. Of course, they are not going to exempt a project authorization, but they are delegating part of the responsibility to a technical responsible person for the process, instead of assuming and having to run all tests and technical analysis that do cost more and give a greater burden to the owners. So the map of the Minister of Agriculture, Livestock, and Supply have an ordinance. They require the register of the agronomist, and it must be regularized at ANAC. So when this ordinance is published, they assume they will be overseeing that. They will see if there is regulated at ANAC. If it's a class 2 today, it's not regular with ANAC. So once again, ANAC changed and proposed all this alteration. Some of the changes they are proposing at ANAC, a health test. It's required a CMA, at least fifth class. They will take the one for the driver's license. The rental insurance will be exempted if it's in the area of the farmer, the owner of the drone. So I'm operating my property. I don't need insurance for myself. It's exempted the operational risk analysis for these specific operations. The license or the qualification of the pilot will be the one in the project authorization. Other rules according to MAPA. The authorization for project will be signed by the technical responsible person, will be very simplified. Operational restrictions limited to 30 meters of height. So they are exempting or flexibilizing it because they know that this type of aircraft flies slow in a rural environment, away from people, in a line of sight, maximum 1 kilometer, 30 meters high, and there's an extra restriction of power. And I'll explain this a little bit. At 34 kilojoules from the International Standard of Risk Analysis, they limited that in terms of power. As this drone flies at low speed, they are simplifying and using this power as only potential power and gravitational power. So the weight and height, and this creates this line or this extra curve in the graph. That is this line here. It only affects heavier drones, over 100 kilograms, creating an additional restriction in terms of height. That's the only extra restriction. Other than that, it's limited to 30 meters of height. As it is in a controlled environment, the power or the mechanical energy is the potential of impact. So in the case of an accident, this energy, destruction energy that could be caused by this aircraft. So this is an controlled energy with a controlled risk. That's the analysis made by them to flexibilize this rule. And a little bit on our work, the certificate drone, me and my partner, we are aeronautical engineers. Our background is in certification and in-flight essays. We've worked for the Air Force. And we had the first experimental authorization long range in Brazil in 2016. We were working, we had the first cab of 48 kilometers. We worked on the first BVLOS flying over 20 kilometers away from the base. And the first project authorization is combustion engine. So it's the only one in Brazil. And the first cab for class 2 of spring. We worked in experimental cab, project authorization and consultancy for development and certification of drones. And we also work or aid other regulators. DECEA, Anatel, this image of Anatel is the use of frequencies in Brazil, and not everyone knows, is quite disturbed, quite hard to find the frequencies and the potencies to get the most of communications. And it's something very restricted, very delicate for drones. We help a lot with this Anatel certification, the technical certification for this. Well, that's what I had to say. I'm available to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. Very well. The presentations were very interesting. I think we can see this engagement. The speakers got excited. So we still have about 20 minutes to discuss some questions. Yeah. I thank everyone who sent questions. I encourage you to send more questions so as to cover this. I'm going to start with a question for Moises. Like we mentioned at the beginning of this panel, talking about pilot training, and you mentioned the initiative of ex-pilot. Very well done, very clear, Moises. Thank you. Today, in the training that ex-pilot provides, do you feel your feeling as an instructor? What is the difference in energy that the student needs between the learning about the machine, and integrating to the rest of the aviation? I mean that how much efforts, as an instructor, how much efforts do you demand to teach the student to pilot the machine, and how much efforts for this machine operation be done in an integrated manner to take the advantage of, so DECEA's focus on this, so to separate between equipment operation, air, air space access. Of course, to fly with drones, one of the points that makes it for a drone to be so successful is the excitement, the access to an aircraft. So we know to become an aviator of a manned aircraft, it's a long path, it's a high cost and everything else. So there's this excitement to pilot in piloting drones because you become an aviator even if you're on the ground, especially those at the FPB, bring this excitement to pilot that equipment and everything else. So the necessary energy for the first step for that drone training, it comes naturally due to this natural excitement. So it's easy. When we go into the theoretical part to study for a private pilot, the airplanes, aeronautical knowledge, and so forth, the student energy kind of drops and my energy increases. I need to excite them, to incentive them, to encourage them. So the first part is fast, it's quick. The second part, I have to be there encouraging the student because most are not really motivated because they don't want to study. They don't want this to go deeper. Although those who want this kind of qualifications, they think about differently. So the third part, flying over 400 feet, this excitement returns. So talking about energy enthusiasm, that's the machine, high enthusiasm, theoretical less, theory less, and then at the end, this enthusiasm comes back because it's joining both universes. So in terms of efforts from the student, I see this, what you're saying, because due to the level of automation that this aircraft have, so it's relatively simple to learn about the machine. When you have a more sophisticated integrated, one of the most sophisticated integrations that we saw here today was Fernando's in the internal operation of the airdrome, including the airdrome operator himself. So we saw the importance of a good coordination. We saw recently the tragic incident in Lima in November 18th, due to a lack of coordination, openly so, between the firefighters during the takeoff. And you mentioned this, the increase of availability of runway, the cost decrease, and also a highly integrated operations with the airport's dynamics. I like to ask you along this line of, in considering you as a coordinator of this and your pilots, is there a concern of for additional training, of additional integration to be able to pilot in this sector? So linking between my sensors, how do you provide to your pilots this kind of knowledge? Is there specific training for this kind of situation? Great question. I thought about adding to what Moises mentioned. I thought it's very interesting in what he talks about, to motivate, to hold on when it's the drone, when it's the joystick, that everyone wants to do it. When everyone, no, let me show you on our back here, he back. So this part that we brought to the authorities, to the airport authorities, because bringing them, before adding this demand, before adding them in this project, which is the drone operations, we sat down with them, we trained, we talked about ICA 140. They know this well. They worked in the area. They are from maneuvers, from movement area, so they dominate the physiology. The operation itself was easy, but training of showing a reback, showing the processes, designed KOP for them. The drone is not difficult to pilot. The drone, it's easy. You have if you've played PlayStation 2, if you play Super Nintendo, you're able to dominate this. But to be coherent, to be safe, to be intelligent, to know when to make the right decision of what I should do at this specific time. That's what we brought to the airport authorities. Need to think quickly in a new operation, drone, aircraft, tower calling, emergency exit. Where do I go with the exit? Use the return to home, or do I leave manually, which is faster? What should I do? Everything we designed in KOP, and we brought to the airport authorities, and let's say monthly or quarterly, to be more specific, we do a follow-up. Let's see what the fly, how this happens. Let's see what his flight is doing. So you have a check. We monitor. We avoid to bring more pressure to the, because he knows about the pressure. But to the drone we go. We look. How's the operation going? If there was something that can be improved, or if you're not understanding that it's going outside the established pattern or standards, we bring him back and we talk again. Very cool, very nice, because independently of legislation that covers this, because today ANAC does not demand any kind of training or qualification for operations of your kind, although it's clear it's a high demand for knowledge by the pilot to do this in an integrated manner. And here, talking about integration of the pilot and awareness of the user, I go back to Cornel Vargas' mantra, which I counted how many times Fernando said standard, but impossible to count how many times you mentioned awareness of the user. So, concerning this, we have a question here concerning this multi-drones operation, and how does the user sees this difficulty, because you see that it's an audience, air shows and so that also don't have this aviation background usually, and they face a reality that's plus concerning multi-drone operation. So how do you see this in terms of the main difficulties of having multi-drone operations, both in terms of the operator himself or the airspace access? Thank you for the question, Lucas. It was a good one. What happens really is that the multi-drones operation has a electronic fence, and the drones, if everything works out, they're going to be flying within that confined space. The most complicated thing when we have a multi-drone operation is to set up the operational plan, many times in a specific area within the airport, many times within a controlled area next to heliports, especially in the city of São Paulo. But one of the main points that I tried directly when we started to operate in visual forms was the specialized treatment, the professional treatment with the operators. So today they are totally capable of working with the control towers, as well as our friends from the airports commented. There's no takeoff without a pre-authorization by the tower. There's no takeoff without a coordination, independently of being a commercial use. Takeoff only happens if it's in the primary safety conditions. There's no kind of forcing the issue. This was a non-negotiable condition. Like I mentioned in my presentation, we had 8 decisions of the board to then state that they no longer need to meet, but let's continue to have the special authorizations. And ANAC has done a fantastic job in analyzing these processes, but very, very detailed and professional, but it has led to great results. So what the most important thing is that these professionals of this company that was mentioned, they really try to operate in a professional manner, so much so that they operate a greater number of drones in very complex regions. Very interesting that another case that the qualification was key and not totally with regulations, because there's no specific regulations for multi-drone operations. But this is very interesting. But also in the history of aviation, we've seen that the best practices led us in a great extent to good results. But this standardizations led us to the standard that we find in commercial aviation. For this, I now go to my friend Lucas concerning how dynamic these changes in regulations of norms, standardizations, and like ANAC and DECEA and all agencies and authorities that coordinate this area they promote, and we feel this in a very intense way because they already deal with aviation. Everyone that works with this sees the need of good regulations as the driver of this technology, as the engine of this technology. So I'd like to know from you, how do you see this dynamism, and how dynamic are these authorities being in the process of authorizing these norms and the integration of this best practice that we see T4, that Zurich has, that Exmobots has, in the body of the regulations? Great question. Historically, aviation became the safest means of transport because of the incorporations of lessons learned that we have here. So aviation has 1 century of history, and this 1 century it learned from each accident, from each incident, from each fact that to happen, incorporating this as requirements. So there's many different requirement bases for different risk levels, risk tolerance, and different operations to incorporate lessons learned. So the precept of a regulatory foundation base is for it to evolve, for it to learn and evolve. This is this is common. This is part of regulations since always. That's why we have the regulation agencies communicating amongst each other at the global level and sharing these experiences, and for they to evolve together. There's no at the international level, the JARUs that they share in the RPAs, they share these requirements and these lessons learned, and they have this exchange of information to evolve with rules. And ANAC is very much aware of this. The SEA, all regulators are very much aware of this, and they have evolved in their foundations to follow both the market demands as well as the lessons learned from technology and the maturity that technology has been bringing about. I think it's very positive for us to have this dynamic way of working, both flexibility of the regulator in updating and evolving its foundations, as well as flexibilize the possibility, operational possibilities. Great. And we see that it's a continuous effort, and with a little bit of spice, let's say. Vargas mentioned about this, to awareness the user and brings us close to us, because differently from manned aviation, you have at least one place to go, which is the airport, and from there you're going to see what happens in aviation. In certain ways, you're going to concentrate the oversight dynamics. In the case of drones, you don't have that. So if you don't bring the user close to you in terms of convincing and awareness, it's not through the enforcement per se, just enforcement, that the person is going to accept all the demands that a good integrations with the airspace requires. We've seen this in the drone enable that happened recently 2 weeks ago in Montreal, where we brought this up of the importance of bringing in the experience of the users and to add value to the user dynamics much beyond of having integrated in the airspace dynamics and the use of these equipment. We have a question from curiosity that our time allows from the audience that concerns how Zurich Airport deals with this block from in terms of airport zones, a doubt that people have with this block airport zones. There's this block no-fly zone, this barrier. DJI does not allow us to fly, but the procedures within the fly zone of DJI. We send them the authorization that SARPAS supplies us with to be able to take off within the airdrome. This authorization, this release for us to be able to use a drone inside the area of the airdrome for DJI, it's valid, and they release our control so that I may take off. If I'm not able to have this release, and it was mentioned, well, I've gone through this. I forgot a signature. I I forgot a document. So we learned from this also. So DJI releases through the authorization of the SARPAS document, very well presented by yesterday by one of the speakers, and it also for the DECEA audience to see there's this back and forth. The user requests a flight, and that request is the one that's used to authorize in terms of the manufacturer can go to China to be able to approve that specific flight through this authorization. And it's also nice for the SEA to see how their work resonates, that goes beyond the user and also to the manufacturer. So DJI does not authorize it, you're not able to. If you're flying in an airport with DJI equipment, there are some alterations, some changes, some manipulation. So there's no registry, and you cannot be blocked. Our drone, I'm able to turn on the drone, but from the time that you try to take off, no, you're blocked. You're blocked. Okay, great. Our time is up. I think it was very interesting, this panel, in the sense that although such a wide range of topics, at least one of the topics was important for you who were listening and saw yourself in the dynamics of all these parts, from the pilot training, special operations, aircraft certification. I hope it has been a good experience for you, and thank you very much. A round of applause for all our colleagues.
For urban air mobility in the sixth forum, we are going to debate the new management system, vision of the future, and integration of the entrance at CCAB. We would like to invite the speakers to have their seats as we introduce them. Captain CTA R1, José Ayrton Patricio, expert in system engineering for ATAG from the Embraer Group. José Alberto Werner, leader in UTM engineering. CTA Captain Marcelo André da Silva, AD for UTM management for air traffic control. The moderator will be Captain Christian da Silveira Spirit, head of innovation of the Institute for Air Traffic Control. Questions and remarks may be sent to the participants throughout Slido.org. The most voted questions will be asked in the end of all presentations during the debate. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here in this forum, especially along with such amazing professionals, people I have been with for so long, and that Patricio will have Werner online from Embraer, and this new, but not new, but this new member of Brazilian Airspace, there are eVTOLs, and their operations in their urban airspace. This is going to be a disruption in the lives of citizens. And as Colonel Andre mentioned, he may not have held his hair to get to this moment, but he will be able to fly it. Will be able to live this dream of Jetsons. We have flying cars providing a fast, quick, and safe service. And for that to happen, a lot of the work from Embraer, from EVA, and DECEA is key for that. Now let me pass the floor to Patricio. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, to be part of this event. I shared with Major Hedges last morning that I've been to many events in the past years, but I have never been part of SIRESANT. I was in Drone Enable 2021, and it's an honor, and I'd like to highlight here how impressed I am with the quality of the organization from CINDACTA and the quality of the presentations and forums. I learned a lot. It was very interesting. And I hope to get closer to your standards here. I am José Ayrton Patricio. Many of you know me as Patricia. I worked at FAB for 31 years. I ended my career at CGNA, and I've been in the industry for the past 5 years. I've been working engineering for ATAC. We are developing a UTM, urban traffic management system, is a solution for traffic management within the air urban mobility. I'll try to be brief. You know me that I get really excited about this, but I'll try to manage my time. And I was told, Patricio, I was told, Patricio, Brazil game today, be fast, don't get too excited. I'll be speaking about this management we are thinking, we are dreaming of to implement in the ecosystem called urban air mobility. And I'll start with a brief introduction on what AAM is. That is advanced air mobility. That is it derives from AM, the urban air mobility, and then I'll be speaking about the challenges of the system. We do have some challenges, and challenges don't mean they are hurdles that we cannot transpose. They are there for us to overcome them and implement the best possible solution. And I was speaking about the features of the system, what I need to have, what the system must have as features to scale up and manage the traffic the best possible way. This is an image that's quite familiar if you live in Rio. That was the first day of Rock in Rio. And what does it have to do with our topic here? Well, most people, or a large part of people, got a flight that was 45 minutes, Rio Sao Paulo, or from Brasilia, 1.5, 2 hours to get to Rio. And they spent 4 hours there in traffic to get to the Rock in Rio site. But this is seasonal, it's Rock in Rio, people are having fun. But well, what do you think about citizens that live every day and they have to commute from home to work? And in Rio, I'm from here. They spent 141 minutes. I thought it was São Paulo that was complicated in terms of commuting. And look at the costs that the mobility costs annually. This data was until 2019. That was the pandemic. This data is being reviewed, not only in Brazil, but the cost here in terms of traffic jams, 400 billion in 2019. And according to the information we have, the time lost in traffic costs us 101 billion in terms of losses. This is the cost of mobility we pay every day to work. So the proposal of air mobility is to reduce or mitigate this impact regarding time spent and the cost associated to this. So we could get all these amounts we saw from the previous slide and invest it in education and so on. And what is the concept of advanced air mobility? First, let me remind you definition of mobility that among many that I've been following since 2017, SSS, air mobility are safe operations and also efficient operations for air traffic in a metropolitan area for manned aircrafts and unmanned systems. And they complement saying that this is researched and in a coordinated way between industry, academia, and government. Everything we said, we cannot think of air mobility without these three fronts. In here, what is the concept of advanced mobility? We will serve not only the urban, the metropolitan area, but also places that were not served before or never were thought of being served before in terms of air mobility. Challenges. Well, this mobility brings a series of challenges to us, but we have to understand their urban scenario was very little known for us at ATM, but it's known for those that fly helicopters, and it brings some difficulties. This is a 3D image of the approach of Congonhas Runway 17. Here is a well-known area called helicopter control. We have between Qualification 2 and 4 almost all the concentration of heli points in São Paulo probably changed with time. 130 heli points, you know that very well. This is a success from the DECEA implemented in 2004, and we can mobilize and access safely the airspace in that area at the end of the runway 17 of Congonhas. Here is another challenge, microclimate. When we start thinking of urban mobility, imagine an avital flying low. Somebody mentioned the meteorology, the impact for drones. So imagine just for an avital. A situation like I had in Rio, the surface fog in the airport to have all those sensors and systems, but how can I do that into avtals and low altitude and the meteorology in the center is this not the same as I have the beachport or the airport. I cannot use as a reference the airport in some cases to have a safe avtal flight. Me and Marcio André, my friend, saw this in Rio in the Eve flight last year. So microclimate is quite interesting and we have to scale up safely. It's a very brief study made in 2018 to 2020 in Europe, showing that some cities were mentioned with optimal nominal conditions for mobility and air mobility, and the others a little more unfavorable. You see, Athens and Rome are very good cities according to the studies to scale up and think of AM, whereas other cities are not there. The climate situation is more complicated. It doesn't mean that you cannot operate in these regions, but we have to implement systems and sensors for microclimate for this model. Here is the picture of our boy or our avatar I always say that when I was called to work on this project, my boss said I'll work with eVTOL. eVTOL, or what a strange name, eVTOL, but it's an electrical vehicle that lands and takes off vertically. And this vehicle has needs, and there are new users. I have to understand the performance, the system limitations, so I can manage it safely. Here's another picture. Werner next will compliment have been working with me. And here's the profile of this vehicle. It is completely different. It behaves like a chopper with a fixed wing, and the airspace must know how to deal with it. And the system has to manage this vehicle in this situation of optimal performance to take off and to approach. Imagine operating with electricity. It's on an electrical vehicle, low altitude, with an unfavorable attitude. The battery consumption is directly impacted by that. Here is another image of 4D trajectory that we work with, and it's key to ensure perfect dynamics of this flight, potentialize the features of the vehicle. And in red, you'll see the impact of weather, where users propose a new trajectory in 4D so they can optimize their ramp up in the flight. Another challenge, which is very good, this is delivery made by Speedbird, the new user, new service, and I have to think that I don't have only eVTOL. I have drones, I have delivery, I have in the airport area application of drones, just like our friend just told us about. And these users join other users that are already in the system. I still have commercial aviation, general aviation. I still have other operations, and I have to accommodate for it. Here is the calculation for UML from NASA. Andrea is going to speak about it, at least mention it. I don't give a spoiler, but this UML means level of maturity of UAM. UAM maturity level, level 4. In this calculation here, NASA established 100 simultaneous operations in a metropolitan area. Getting these numbers, we are able to get to a number of 4,800 operations a day for UML4, and considering low visibility operations and night operations, once it won't have noise restriction, noise abatement, operating 24 hours, 9,600 operations a day, 4,800,000,000 passengers per year. This is something we have to be prepared for. Not to mention the flow. We have this situation of the flow, and it's completely new. Do I have miles and trail that my friend Andrea works with that at CGNA? This is a picture of two hypotheses that I dedicate some corridors, and we thought of simulating this dislocation between two vertiports, and we see that I will start having other parameters, not only miles and trails, but minutes and trails. The distance will be a little bit shorter for me to scale up these operations in the future. And let's not forget communication, navigation, surveillance, and information and new for human. I have an entire ATM structure well set up by DECEA. Here, 22 million square kilometers, all covered by satellites, navigation aid, and I have to think about a urban scenario. Am I ready for this? Do I have communication, navigation, and information? Lucas showed us the frequency spectrum. This almost be taken into account. Another challenge. Technology always brings benefits to us. And let's not forget the benefits, but here I have a picture of a hypothetical, an illustration of a vertiport. A vertiport is the place where you think of operating landings and takeoffs, and with the cycle of recharge for each operation. here's a fast stand. But everybody asks, Patricia, with this huge amount of aircraft, eVTOLs, how are you going to work with them? This is an image of Rio, the simulation we had with EV, but how are we going to work with that? Data from 2020. Consultants predict 160,000 UAM aircraft, eVTOLs, or flying cars, if you find it better. And it was mentioned here, I won't mention about and all, conspire against my person, but you see here every day. I mean, if we stay here for a week, every day they have a larger number. It's interesting to see. But Patricio, I have an eVTOL and we get for consultancy. That's why I spoke to Colonel Andre. He made a spoiler. And back then, we asked for those that understand about it. We asked the Jetsons where to put eVTOLs. Easy breezy. What's the problem? Problem solved. Now I go to the final part. My time is up. I got excited. So this system must have some features. It must be safe. Imagine flying low altitude over Rio, near Sao Paulo. So for the passengers, it's wonderful. They use their headsets. But what about the background, the back end to ensure safety? Another feature I mentioned scalability. When we speak on 9,600 operations, it's crazy, but it's a reality. We'll have to work with according to the numbers we have. This is a vision from NASA. UML, I spoke of UML4, medium density, medium complexity, and that's how you think of scale up UAM. My system must be ready to scale up. Here, this was 2000, the beginning of the year, the journal, the Embraer company, foresee 200 flying cars until 2035 in Rio de Janeiro. Interoperability. Let's not forget that my system, when I say my system, to manage the flow in their airspace must be interoperable, because their space must be interoperable. It's a common point. There is no use of the whole life segregating space. I work with flow. When you segregate, you lose capacity. My time is up, but I'm almost in the end. Interoperability. And here, to better understand, is an image that I got from the flight we had in Rio. Me and Andre and the people from AV. So you understand the complexity. It was one single flight to operate at Galeão Airport, and I had to wait on paying a low altitude while the tower was processing one landing and takeoff. I cannot think of a system that won't exchange data and information so that I can interoperate in the airspace. And here, once again, I have to think of my UTM, my ATM, exchanging information, integration, not only the level of system of a service provider, but there's an entire network. So fleet operator, I have the PSU, UASP, the provider, vertiport operator, an entire network that I have to ensure interoperability and integration of these players. Also interesting, most people I talk to and say, "Oh, I want an eVTOL, like I want Uber. I order an Uber. I want to have it in 1 minute by my door." But Uber don't have to process a flight plan. Uber has to process intention. Imagine the user, the future user. They want to order and they want to get the flight, but there is a processing time. So the system must respond or try to service the best possible way this intention, this new user here. Focus on the user journey. When we started working with the system, what did we do? How to map the pain points for user. What is the pain of the pilot, the pain of the controller, the pain of fleet operator, the entire structure to have. So I want to build a system that sees the user pain. Otherwise, it will be just another system without good acceptance. Here is just an image of our simulation in Rio. A flight leaving from Galeão, landing in Baja, 10-minute flight. And with a car, it takes 1 hour, 42 hours, and you pay a very high price for Uber. If you want to go from Galeão to Baja, you know how critical this is if you know Rio. So this is a very good experience, and our system must be sustainable. There in Rio, you have a very high flow of migrating birds, and what does it have to do? I'm saying that I'm delivering a vehicle that is completely electrical, is non-pollutant, but what about the ecosystem? It has to be sustainable. I have to think that this vehicle will scale up in terms of autonomous flights. So it's all within this package of system. And here is the image of a controller. When we speak of air urban mobility, everybody asks the operators, air traffic controllers, ask, is it going to increase my workload? Will it be complex to me? There is a limit when you think 9,600 operations. Is this guy able to process all this? No. Not by incompetence, but we have different capacities and safety capacities for provisions. And finally, our proposal was launched in 2018, 2019. I was along with the Embraer and Harris, and this is online. It's a vision of our UATM for 2030, and it's Flight Plan 2030. We're bringing our vision of mobility. Yeah, I need sound here.
For managing urban air traffic that also exchanges information with ATM and UAS service suppliers. As demand for urban air mobility grows, UATM will mitigate safety risks, reduce demands on air traffic control, ensure equitable airspace access, and adapt as aircraft evolve from piloted voice-based flights towards autonomy. UATM is built on two foundational services: airspace and procedure design, and information exchange. These foundational services ensure a harmonized approach to integrating all airspace users, including conventional aircraft and unmanned aircraft systems. To support daily traffic management needs, UATM provides 4 operational services: flight authorization, flow management, dynamic airspace management, and conformance monitoring. We are working with air navigation service providers, government and industry to tailor UATM solutions for their communities.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the delay. Thank you so much. I get really excited. It was amazing to be part of this event, meet some friends, former bosses. I'm really pleased. Thank you so much. See you in the next editions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricio. Great presentation. Gives us an idea of what's coming up next because it's already happening. The tests, aircraft are already there. That a couple of years ago we thought it was going to take longer, but it's knocking on the door. And for the next presentation, Mr. José Alberto Werner is going to talk a little bit about the future vision of in the world. Werner, can you hear us? Some audio problems.
Consegue me ouvir? Ok. Bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone.
Eu sou o José Verter.
I'm José Verter. I work in IFI. I've been here for a year and a half. It's a new company, but I have experience in Brazil and outside. I work for Techie. I worked with Patricio for many years, and basically in air traffic, government systems, embedded systems, and now at EV, I work with the techno aspects of ATM systems that EV is going to launch. I think. Let's go to our presentation. Very well. Very well. I'm getting some feedback. Sergeant Rodriguez, thank you for all the support to be able to do this remotely. So, EV, the main objective is to develop aircraft to be part of urban mobility, UAM, but not just a vehicle. With the object of complementing this environment. So, just a vehicle, we're going to have some limitations because we're not going to be used airspace as necessary. We're going to be used with the infrastructure resources, offer the services, and so forth. So, EV wants to introduce an ecosystem. So, here we're talking about not just development of the aircraft per se, but also support services for this operation that, with the operator, but also the ATM. So the focus here is ATM. It's a urban air traffic management, UATM. It's like the market starting to call it also, this specific function. So we want to develop introduce an ecosystem that's going to be agnostic. It's not just for our aircraft. It's an ecosystem that's going to support this kind of operation as a whole. And the objective of this ecosystem is to support the operators. Today, that's a reality of organizations that can support these operations. And the future service providers, be they service providers that are linked to the USP or service providers that's private, that is acting together with others in the same area. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on. Talking about the aircraft, this is one of the current design of the aircraft. The focus of this aircraft is urban mobility. These are very short flights, focusing on moving people in an urban environment. So it's 100% electric. A number of differences from normal aircraft. The rate of use, the focus in the short flights, the ease of flying both horizontally sustained by the wing as well as vertical. It's going to be an aircraft that's going to be more silent in comparison to what's out there today, more cost efficient. So the idea is to expand this market with this kind of aircraft. We can able to create a market that doesn't exist today. So not only VID flights. So it's going to be different. And of course, the aircraft is going to be developed to support autonomy. It's going to be able to fly in an autonomous manner, although at the beginning we're going to operate with a pilot. All the concepts, both the aircraft as well as the ATM that we're developing, we consider a gradual adoption. That is, there's going to be no big bang, there's going to be no sudden evolution, so it's going to be gradual. So first it's going to fly using all the rules and the current structure of the airspace and the rules of aviation rules. And in the future, it's going to start to introduce specific functions and uses. So, of course, showing the aircraft the most interesting part, but I'm going to go to the ATM. Although it's not as exciting, I would say it's as important as. So there's great differences concerning what these aircrafts are going to introduce in the market in terms of what happens today in terms of normal aviation, commercial aviation. So we're talking about very short flights, 10, 20-minute flights, low level, low altitude flights. So there's important considerations in terms of obstacle, possible conflict, all the meteorology, local weather. It's going to be more important. The sharing of this airspace with other different users in terms of characteristics and capacities. Point that's going to introduce a number of changes or alterations. The use of vertiports. So we consider that the market considers that it's going to be necessary something more than a heliport or a helipoint. It's going to be necessary a system with an additional structure, especially when we have a flight density, a greater flight density. So this heliport is going to support passenger flows that are coming in and out, the aircraft flow that's going to be sharing these resources that usually are going to be restricted resource. The vertiports are going to be points where of great interest. So the downtown of a city, high value areas where the available hour is usually expensive and small. So the sharing of resources is going to be something essential. These flights, especially at a larger scale, are going to have a turnaround time between points of very short turnaround time, much shorter than its exists today in the aviation. We're going to have a larger reload time with the flight, normal recharging than commercial aviation. Doesn't mean that in all landings you're going to have to charge your batteries. You need a number of flights to charge again. When you need to recharge, you can have a larger, greater recharge. Of course, that they're not. There's a limitations in all times. There's an aircraft cannot wait for the resource to be available, so the holding time can harm the operation. You're going to avoid for other flights to be done if you need to recharge. So the system, the ecosystem has to avoid as far as it can the holding patterns and to allow the most the direct flights, for the flights to be as direct as possible. The number of flights per day for an aircraft is going to be much greater than it's there in the market today until we reach a greater degree of use. There's going to be a need for a business case, flights to airports. We're not going to be able to avoid airports. Airports are going to be a natural destination for this kind of flight. There's also a large variety of aircraft, greater dependence on the local weather conditions. the integration when we talk about Uber, for example, or something similar to Uber, perhaps not the same thing, but the services on demand services is going to be an important characteristics for this operation. Another point, another that market understands is going to be local rules. So how these flights are done in the context of a city, the local authorities of a city are going to have a need to interact with this operation, much greater need than is there exists today. So we have to take into account that locally there's going to be specific rules in each city, for example, that have to be taken into account for this environment, and also more complex restrictions to the fact that we're flying in an urban environment. There's going to be restriction in terms of flights due to police operations, for example, or emergency flights, events, and so forth. All this can affect the system's capacity and how each operation should be done. EV is not developing this alone by itself. We're following a number of activities, a number of initiatives throughout the world, and executing some on our own. For example, we had a CONOPS with Australia, with INSP of Australia. We also had a CONOPS in Miami, CONOPS in Rio, with the participation of DECEA and ACC and other manufacturers and other participants, with the objective of better understanding both the market as well as the issue of the airspace environment. We also held we also part of a consortium. We coordinated a consortium in England, in Japan, and recently we held a simulation in Chicago. So the objective for all this is to acquire knowledge, to gain specific information about each country's locations, to be able to have the capacity both in terms of the vehicle as also in terms of service and support and the systems that we're developing for us to be able to support these kinds of operations. And also, another important point is that in our specific development of the ATM, we are doing an important alignment both with DCA, the SIA, that for the time being, from drone specifically, we have this, but also with initiatives that are being done specifically for the urban mobility, UAM, the U8 that are done by NASA and FAA, and in Europe by the Eurocontrol and agencies in Europe. Urban air mobility. So some specific characteristics of the UAM. There's a number of differences of the reason of the why. Only the ATM as today, or even the UTM, also as is there today, that is for drones. It's not enough to meet the characteristics that we're going to have for the UAM environment. Of course, is the fact that we're going to have at the beginning piloted aircraft. For some time, it's going to be piloted aircraft depending on the location, especially passengers. So this is going to be generate safety requirements, much stronger safety requirements than are out there today, especially taking into account the volume that's going to exist for this kind of flights. The flights, like I mentioned previously, have a very different characteristics, very short flights, a very short turnaround time, operation based in vertiport, so this generates the need to there be routes. So these flights are going to happen, at least at the beginning, from anywhere to anywhere. So it's going to base in vertiport. So most important is to assure that there's alternative routes, very well-defined routes, where these aircrafts can fly between the vertiports. There's some proposals where, from NASA, from FAA, for example, where in the connections between greatly used vertiports, part of the routes be a dedicated corridor. So perhaps yes, perhaps no, but there's going to be the need to have large coexistence between these kind of operations and what's already there, helicopters and general aviation. Operations are going to greatly increase in terms of operation time, density, but especially there's going to be gradual. EV and the market as a whole understands that it's not going to be a big bang. Any system that we introduce, any applications that we may introduce, has to guarantee that we have the integration with what exists there and introduce it little by little as necessary and visible. New functions, new capacities. Large sharing with general aviation. We cannot fly only in a segregated airspace. There's going to be sharing, so any kind of system has to take this into account. Share with the current airspace. Some compliance characteristics specific, not exactly like it is today or like it's necessary today for drones, for example. And it's necessary to have equity for access. We want to avoid exclusivity because we don't want to restrict the creation and expansion of this. We have specific performance criteria, and this increase in the airspace, both UAM as well as drones, is going to generate these very specific needs. This, in our case, are the drivers for us to create this system, this ecosystem, to support this kind of operation. Very similar to what Patricia mentioned, we're going to have the adoption horizontal at the beginning. We're going to have these aircrafts being piloted, manned aircrafts. So using the conventional ATM procedures and technology, but in the future, we're going to have, in a very near future perhaps, we're going to have the need for specific procedures. So gradually incorporating new capacities, new performance requirements, equipment, characteristics, aircraft registers to allow for these aircrafts to work, for the operation to be optimized. This is a context showing the context of how we are seeing the systems. Here on top we have the ISP for ATMs, the UTMs for drones, but we have a separate service, different and specialized, to support air traffic with the rules that we all mentioned concerning. There's a graduation in terms of the adaptation. Adaptation has to be done gradually, incorporating the rules and current airspace access ways. So when demand starts to grow, this system to be able to support this additional demand without having an impact or limiting its growth. Here we call this fleet operators. These are operators of these aircrafts. Airlines, small airlines, or even large airlines. So EV, it's been published, this information of demand. So we have purchases of 100, 200 aircraft. We have some significant airlines here. We have the vertiports. So vertiports, much more than a heliport and much than a helipoint. They're going to have some kind of system to support this operation, especially to guarantee that there is some kind of reserve of resources. Today in a helicopter flight, very common, especially in a location that it can have congestion, that a helicopter going to a specific heliport has to be on a holding pattern for 10 minutes, for example, awaiting for that heliport that kill-off to be really liberated, freed. So in this context is to be very harmful for an operation to guarantee the services. So this is an important point that we have to guarantee that when the operator informs and updates its flight intentions, its flight, the vertiport can also guarantee that the resource, both for landing, takeoff as landing, are available for that operation. And tell also, in this context, another important point, another important concept is as the SPs, the service providers, we cannot guarantee that the UNSP, the traditional, is going to be able to introduce investments to support, give everything that's necessary in terms of infrastructure, weather data, communications, and so forth. So the market is seeing this concept here that providers could be private providers, public providers, but dedicated to this UAM environment. Also could be dedicated to one. There's a number of names for this service provider, NASA and FAA, some PS1 in Europe, UTM, but it's like an extended UTM. For example, in Brazil, it's a similar context, but independently of the name, most of the authorities and the agencies involved in this and the industry overall understand that it has to be, at least in the beginning, in this decade, for example, is still a specialized service, so separated from ATM services and UTM services for drones. Here, just an idea of accountability and responsibility of the service provider. Just quickly, I know my time is up, and here I just wanted to show this last image showing how this evolution is going to happen. So this image comes from a paper from NASA, XTM. It's like the extension of what we have today in terms of UTM plus ATM. So here we can see that today we have, in fact, air traffic for drones. We have the traditional air traffic at the beginning. Right at the beginning, the eVTOLs are going to work with normal air traffic, but right after, as in the yellow part, we're going to have a specific air traffic service for this kind of flights. Urban flights, UTM, is going to have to live with after even a rocket, they're all going to be integrated in the same kind of information. Of course, today's technology can support this, but today we have to give it some time to be adopted, to evolve for some technology, especially in the communications field. But it's going to be an environment that we can easily see what's out there today. So this is what I had to share. Thank you very much, and I'm here at your disposal.
Thank you, Werner, for your presentation. It was amazing, amazing presentation, showing how these changes are going to be in our near future. You mentioned 2024, 2020X, still in this decade. And these changes will require a lot from the industry to produce then all the technology to make these aircrafts adequate, and also a regulator. So I would like to invite Captain Marcio André, who will be speaking about the sales view, the sales work to make the CCAB suitable for this new commerce. Good morning, I'm just waiting for them to load my presentation. Meanwhile, I'm Captain André, I work at SDOP in ATM planning. I'm an expert in air traffic control, and I also work as the UAM manager that is part of the Cirrus project that was presented here previously. I think they are loading my presentation. I'll make a brief presentation, quite objective, so you have an idea of the context of what we have been doing about air urban mobility in Brazil. And also the perspective is to integrate eVTOLs in our airspace, because if it takes too long, then we have to have the Brazil's game here. I see everybody's eager to go. Let's go. Before starting, a brief introduction of the history so you understand where we are coming from and the point we are in this technological process. Brazil historically is involved in the context of innovation regarding aviation. We have many facts that prove that since the creation of the airplane, the invention of the airplane was made by Brazilian, and at the right, it is the beginning of the air transportation of passengers in Brazil in 1927. That's when there was the creation of Varig company. An interesting fact is that back then there was not even one single airport in Brazil. So the aircraft was a hydroplane, and embarking and disembark was on the beaches. So, since the beginning, historically, Brazil is involved within innovation in aviation. In the 50s, there was another leap, the introduction of jet planes. This was something disruptive, increasing reach, improving the quality of services and air transportation for passengers. And another leap was the coming of helicopters in Brazilian aviation. It happened in the end of the 50s, and the first helicopter, a Bell 47, came into Brazilian airspace. It was a great technological leap, bringing new possibilities for operations of this kind of aircraft. And why do I say that? Making a connection with air traffic control, just like with the aircraft, as the services provided need to evolve. Air traffic control since the 40s, where the services were very simple with simpler equipment, if compared to today. We have a digital tower. If you are able to see in Santa Cruz, the technological level is extremely high. So the goal of saying all this is that you understand that we are before a new technological leap. Some say the flying car, the new chopper, new plane. And no, the easier way to explain is to say this is a new type of aircraft entering the market. And just like in the past that I just explained, the coming of this new aircraft doesn't mean that helicopters will stop existing. Just like the helix aircraft did not stop existing when jet planes were introduced. Here I have the three types of aircrafts and the manufacturers are planning to operate here in Brazil. So Brazil is in the route, this strategic route where companies from abroad want to operate. The Lyrian, for a German company, in the middle the EV, and then the Vertical Airspace, an American company. And within this context, a lot of people ask questions, and here I want to bring the didactics. But is it manned, unmanned? So just for you to understand, there are two types. It's either manned or unmanned. If it's unmanned aircraft, I could say it's remotely piloted or it's autonomous. It helps simplify the UAS, UAs, and VAN, RPA. A lot of acronyms, so it helps understand. Is it a drone, not a drone? Make an association with what I said. Think that it's a new type of aircraft. In the beginning of operations, there is a consensus in the world that there will be a requirement of an onboard pilot. If you're pilots, maybe you will pilot this kind of aircraft for air traffic controllers. You may manage this kind of traffic. It was mentioned the level, scalability, a relatively high number. I'm going to skip this. You already know this from the other presentation. The ecosystem in our concept of DCE is quite summed up. And we have separations of environments. It doesn't mean it's impossible to go from one environment to the other. Obviously, if you are in the midline in the UAM environment, you'll have to land and take off. So it's going to enter the lower portion. How is it going to be done with requirements of capacity and performance? It's a simplified way on how this is going to operate. Next are information disclosed by the media. In Brazil, up to date, the information I have is about 600 plus orders of aircraft, so it's quite a lot, especially if we take into account that the goal of these companies is to operate the main capitals. So let's see 50% operating here in Sao Paulo, and with this margin mentioned by Patricio of 15 20 minute operations with a short turnaround, it will cause a great amount of operations, which is not feasible to operate with the ATM system as we have nowadays. So we need some sort of progress, modernization, to meet this demand of this aircraft. To the left, the goal aircraft, it's a partnership with the vertical. That's the manufacturer they are buying from. In the middle, Azul is buying from the Lilian. And lastly, Air also has orders of aircrafts in Brazil with a differentiated proposal. Here I'll speak briefly. There are many areas involved in this segment, as mentioned before. And here is how we work this in terms of project from the vision of the cell. We have a holistic approach and see the whole working with dedicated teams for each part. Now we have 32 people, an amazing team. Some are present here today, high technical level, highly specialized people helping us do this job. I always tell the team, we need to think outside the box. We cannot think of rules and systems we have nowadays. We have to think of new solutions to provide a solution for this new environment that awaits us soon. Our challenge is mainly in the safe integration. What is this integration? It's not having operations in a segregated way, but integrated to the airspace so we can fly freely. It's a great challenge, similar to what happens to UAM, but there are differences and specificities. The work philosophy we have as the first step is like crawling. What is crawling? Imagine that one of these companies is already certified, it's ready, it's been over ANAC, and say I have 6 aircrafts and I want to start operating. So basically what we want to do is adapt to the systems, means, and rules we have and make this operation visible. That's the first moment. Secondly, allow a mid-level of scalability. And lastly, the greatest one is to allow these operations on a large scale and make an analogy to what Patricia mentioned, the higher level of maturation, UML 4 until 6, that was published by NASA. Another important piece of information is about the competencies, especially if you're not from the SEA. You don't understand very well. The SEA, among other things, works in 2 points. It's a regulatory agency for aviation in the areas explained, and it's also a service provider for air navigation. So it works in different areas. That's the importance of working not only as a providing organ but also a regulator of this level of service. And we are working based on these studies, as I mentioned, for specialities. And the result of this will be part of CONOPS, is a document, a concept of operation that will make the implementation processes feasible. And what is the importance of this concept of operation? So that it serves at the macro level to have this legal framework, but it will also be a reference and grounds for the implementation processes in this area. It's important for the industry. We spoke with other regulators, manufacturers, and so on. For those working in the industry, they are eager for a solution. They need the regulators to have a level positioning so they can continue filling the gaps to complete their work. So it's important not only for us, but for the industry and academia that run studies, research, and projects in that sense. As these aircrafts are not certified, not completely ready, but we are working already in the reality of helicopters. So the São Paulo area to us is very important. It's a huge lab was have heli control that was previously presented here. It's a solution developed by Brazil. It's been 18 years. It's like has reached the of age now, and they solved the problem for the proximity to Congonhas Airport. The figures there are quite significant, and to us this is great. We are in contact with these operators, helicopter operators, because based on their added knowledge, expertise, we can structure this portion of the airspace and prepare the land, aiming to integrate eVTOL aircrafts as soon as they are ready, and the expectation is for 2025, according to the latest news from manufacturers and air experts. We need data for that. Of course, if you work with air traffic control, how things work. Normally, for the regular aviation, the airspace is well structured. We have seats, routes, a series of things that make this flight feasible in a more organized fashion. And why does it happen? It's related. Someone said it yesterday. The greater the amount of air operations, it's natural to see the need for a better structure to keep the same level of safety. Likewise, we need to do that in this portion of airspace, and where most of the time we have helicopters and aircrafts flowing visually, and aircrafts type Golf in controlled flight. So we need services and systems to improve that. So we need this data from heliports, helipoints, and vertiports. That's a new terminology. Vertiports. It's similar to a helipoint with a certain structure to make the operations of this type of aircraft possible. Along with that, there is the need to evolve the structure in terms of capacity of airspace. Airspace is a limited, finite resource, and we look at it, we think so much fits in there, but no, there is a limitation. And we need to allow for high scalability of operations, never giving up safety, as regulators that say is constantly worried about it, that make those operations safe in this kind of environment. So we work with studying new types of trajectories, new separation parameters, how we can improve these minimals. There is no magical solution. There is a compensation based in the introduction of new technologies that will provide support to this new type of operation. How is it going to be implemented? It's not going to happen overnight. We have talked to ANAC. One of the approaches is from the normative sandbox that's basically working with a structure conditioned to a certain type of operation in a certain location through a proof of concept in a controlled and safe manner. So we acquire experience and gradually implement this in other locations. So on demand, also in coordination with air operators that will say, oh, we want to operate in city A, B, or C. And together with all these links, we interact to make these operations viable. Lastly, the future. Now we have the air traffic control systems, we have the current systems, our voice communication, the systems that do that. We have seen some assumptions that this current structure won't be enough or won't be able to supply for this future demand. So we are going to need new systems, maybe a new layout. The work, and it will all have to be reviewed to practice something to this new perspective. Like voice communication won't be feasible, so have to choose another solution that is not yet segmented. We are studying some alternatives to make this communication feasible, reducing the most as possible where the computer doesn't need to have so many interventions. And the system, as I mentioned, CONOPS, is important to be the basis for the structuring of requirements to acquire tools along with manufacturers. And with that, I want to finish my presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and let's wait for questions. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you, Andre, for your presentation. Andre made it right on time. So 15 minutes exactly. We had three very interesting presentations. It's a topic that, was mentioned, it's a future that's already happening. We already seen this. Is Werner online with us? Werner? Well, we'll just chat with our two colleagues here. Perhaps Patricio can answer some of the questions that were asked of Werner. But first question, Patricio, what other aspects of the project are being approached beyond the UTM, like the consumer experience, the airspace parameters? How are these other aspects being approached within your project? Good question. I presented part challenges, criteria, but of course I mentioned the matter of the user's journey. So many different aspects are being approached. For example, in the Rio de Janeiro simulation last year, the focus was on the fleet operator and also the user. How when the user accessed the platform, how did he access the platform, how long it took him to board, also the security, access to the aircraft. So we're able to measure and see what was the pain and the user's perception concerning the airspace. We are approaching this because I worked for a long time with this region. I know how complex this airspace can be. We saw in loco flying there the difficulties that can happen for you to think about a route, a dedicated route for eVTOL, but we're able to, in connection with the DECEA, this issue of the airspace, the acceptance by the society also, it's another aspect to be approached. Can you imagine tomorrow you wake up with an aircraft route, even if the objective is to connect people. The acceptance by society is very important. The public's perceptions concerning this new delivery that's being proposed. So many different aspects are being approached, not just this ones, the battery, the energy matrix. So how are we going to thinking about this? In the middle of a city, is this going to have an impact on the population? Is there a university, a hospital around? So many different aspects are being thought about. Yes, just to complement this question, that's a very good one. So this experience between the regulating agencies, the air operators, and industry is very important for the continuity of the studies within this area. So in this opportunity that we had last year to do this work together with DECEA and Levy, it was very important for us to see elements, even breaking of paradigms. We had some presuppositions, and in that experience, many of them were broken because so that in practice some things didn't really work the way we thought they would, and we were able to collect, we had the opportunity of improvements and new approaches to meet this new demand. Thank you. You already introduced to a very important concern for our users here in the Slido. Many asked about how is the urban engineering and airspace engineering are being integrated in different ways, but in summing up, that's the gist of this question. Is there interactions between DCA, between Embraer, ATEC, with other government entities, with other governmental spheres, municipal, federal, state? How is this interaction taking place? Not just ANAC. ANAC is a direct partner, but the non-obvious partners that electricity, traffic engineering, and so forth. It's an approach that's being widely practiced currently is within this triple helix, like we've mentioned this before. So there's representatives of the regulated agencies. We talk to ANAC, to other institutions, even international institutions, with the operators, with the industry also, and with academia. So since this subject matter is in the state of art in terms of development, we don't even have regulations at the OAIC level that encompasses this specific topic. So some studies adapt other publications from OCE and other documents published by private institutions and public also that are working with this area. But at DCA, we have done some partnerships with academia, with some universities. So through ICEA, Christian works there, and also we are demanding from academia that through their abilities, they help us in bringing solutions to these problems, these new problems, and this we consider this to be very important. There's people here from ITA. These are very fantastic people, the level of people we have in Brazil that can work in this kind to find us, to identify solutions for this kind of situations. I like to compliment what Andrew said, and along the lines of what you were saying, this questioning of entities that are participating in the engineering, we look at mobility as mobility overall, and some subsets, different blocks. You cannot break apart the air with urban in this mode. It's to reach at the vertiport, you need sensibility, facilities, cost, through land, all the infrastructure. So it doesn't make sense. So that's why the idea of mobility is to potentialize what's already working and to serve and improve that which is not being met in a satisfactory way for the population. So ideal for you to think about a model that has a connection to the airport. Airport is I want to work with the airport, the demand flow that are going from the work to home. I see what this possibility to have a metro station, bus transportation, another modal that I gain with the scalability and potential that adds value to the user, because that's what the user wants. I live now in São Paulo, but I think it's fantastic. I think for me it helps for you to have the bus station and the metro stations nearby. So when I go working live, I know that I'm going to arrive at this metro station, and then I'm going to go a connection. It's very nice. It's a perception, value added. So the modes should be linked, connected. Thank you for your answers. I think they were very clarifying. Another question from the audience. Yesterday, Major Jorge mentioned an expressive number, 85,000 drone operations on over Paris in 2030. That's what's projected. You mentioned today 4,400 eVTOLs operations on a city like Rio or São Paulo, where we already have 1,000 daily flights. 3-4 important airports in each city. How is this? That's a question for both of you. How is this integration being worked? That's going to be very important between ATM, UAM, and UTM. This work, as I mentioned in the previous answer, it's multidisciplinary. That's the first point. So one of the conclusions is it's useless, or DECEA by itself, to start working and start working by itself, or NAC by itself. It's something that depends on the participation of the different links in society. So events like this one and other events that take place in other occasions, the idea is to encourage the participation both of government agencies, companies, industries, so that each one of them can play their part in this process to in the estimated date for implementation at the beginning of operation. If there is no interconnectivity, there won't be possible and won't be feasible. And concerning the systems, in the DECEA, there's the SIRES program. In the SIRES program, there's PFFF 019, which one or two part of the SIRES program, and there's a different projects. There's a UTM project, there's an anti-drone, there's the air AUM project. So this idea to have this integration for these solutions to lead to a new expected environment in an integrated manner. To complement what Andrea mentioned, these numbers are impressive, but they don't scare us because the vision I have since I started to work in this project, since the beginning of 2018, the numbers increase all the time. New predictions, there's a rupture during the pandemic. But what's a great advantage we have when you see a provider, and I can say this because I knew other providers outside Brazil, DECEA is right there with the top of them as a provider. So this helps. So when you take a system like was presented here in terms of SARPAS or new generation, SARPAS new generation, all the initiatives that are out there in the SEA scalability, like Werner mentioned, it's going to happen from overnight. You're going to have some horizons, but there's a large successful trajectory. We're not starting from point zero. We're not talking about if the operation happens in the airport. We saw that we have applications today. You work with innovation that allows for operations that a short time ago wouldn't be feasible in terms of safety and also other issues, public, legal, and so forth. So these numbers that Major Jorge talked about, we're not going to wake up with this vision, open the window, and I have thousands. In the ULML6, there's use the terms that you're going to look to space, and you're going to see at least an eVTOL, hundreds of thousands in the ULML6, and we are on our way. We have the systems and something else. Rio de Janeiro, I worked there, and the offshore. So Rio de Janeiro, everything happens. You have helicopter flights, you have Delta flights, you have air bases, so you have a more complex scenario than this one. Then you go to São Paulo, you have the heli control. That is urban mobility. You already have urban mobility in São Paulo. We are just improving due to the technology just coming out. So eVTOL is a new user. But when you see those grids and control in São Paulo, allowing for that flow in São Paulo, urban, that's urban mobility. We're going to scale this with safety, and it's going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. Thank you for your answers, for the interaction. Unfortunately, our time is up. We have many other questions, but unfortunately, our time is up. I will ask for the questions to be sent to you later. And with this, we now adjourn our last forum in SIRESANT. I believe it was a great event for all of us who took part in this event as moderators, as speakers, and also as members of the audience. We are able to share our information with all of you live and YouTube. Thank you very much to all. We now invite Sub-Commander of the 3rd Integrated Center of Air Defense and Air Traffic Control, Colonel specialized in meteorology, José Messias Rocha Mendonça, to say the last few words for SIRESANT 2022. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor being with all of you today. I know you're all anxious because in a short while Brazil plays, but your avatar is awaiting to take you homes and hotels just to relax a little bit. As in the protocol, very quickly, I'm going to say of everything that was said here concerning our symposium. We had 6 symposiums with wide encompassing in a short space of time, very fulsome. Thank the organizations. We had 6 forums where we were sure that we have a regulatory framework. We are very much at ease concerning this. You rest your mind at ease that this entire process is regulated, it's normatized. We had a forum concerning the operations with RPAs. We saw public security. We had a colleague who came here to talk about how it's to be used in the Air Force. The analysis done here from Sergeant Aldini. We have the requests and the processes that with her team analyzing. So we have a number of processes. Yesterday we saw that it's over 300,000 processes and requests. So we see that this topic is very interesting. In the 3rd forum, we had use the drone operations. We had enforcement. We had a presentation from DECEA, how you're going to deal with illegal happening, especially with non-collaborative aircrafts. We had the participation of from the trial board, from the Air Force, and from the military police also, for us to be sure that the legislations are out there and they're being followed, especially when something illegal happens, something that's not foreseen in terms of the proper use of drones. Even the Colonel Evandro Sales, we talked about what's a drone. A drone is a Hornet. It's loud. We also had research and development. Well talked about by Professor Christopher of ITSS from meteorological. I like to comment to see if those there do something about concerning meteorology, because he was talking about drones, how they use, and but meteorology is very important. I was reading something about this, about the use of drones in the weather, in meteorology. There's an interesting study that was done in Japan, in the Arctic Sea. It's a layer of ice. How can you measure the wind speed, wind velocity? So many other uses for the sensors to calibrate meteorology. So they use a wire, and is this wire according to the resistance of cooling up or not, or freezing or not. It was able to check wind velocity. There was a margin of error of 1.3 meters per second, but it was accepted for the use of numerical models, because depending on the takeoff weight, if you have lots of equipment and lots of sensors embedded, it's going to be able to operationalize. But here is just motivation. I'm going to head the Integrated Meteorological Center for Air Force. I'm going to have a lieutenant that's going to engage together with you there in the ITA for us to have a study on meteorology. And in research and development, Lieutenant Colonel talked about the challenge that he had when he was heading the drones. So, Andrei, this challenge still remains. Congratulations, and I'm sure that you're now one of the authorities concerning drones, and it's not over. You will always be consulted concerning this. Congratulations to you. So, in all the other forums, we saw how this could be applied, research and development, like I mentioned, urban mobility, especially in terms of integration between ATM and UTM. I am sure there's going to be a convergence, integrations for us to be at ease in terms of the use of drones. We also had different mobilities of the use of drones, like we had this in our veteran, Captain Vargas, that presented here in terms of the use of different drones, and he highlighted the use of awareness. I don't know if you remember it. We have to be aware, especially for there's no conflict, and the improper use of these equipments that many things, they can offer us many things for us to be able to use them. And also, we had the future vision by DCA in terms of the use of this equipment, right? So, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I'd like to call up Lieutenant Colonel Evanio, Lieutenant Colonel Damasio, Lieutenant Max Vinicius, Lieutenant Colonel Andrei, Major Jorge, CINDACTA 2. I know that time is short, but it's going to be quick. But more important than to start the symposium and for us to finish well. And acknowledgement is something we have to do, especially those who anonymously, indirectly contributed for us to be able to hold the symposium. And like many have said here, it's one of the moments that we have to update and to show everyone what we have to do and to offer with you. It was said here by the speaker on agro, the time for agro is different than from aviation. If it rains, it's okay, but for aviation, if it's rain, it's not okay. So one of the problems for the use of drone, if there's rain or low visibility, this is in part of our documents, so it can be unfeasible for its operation. So we're going to work for this to improve. Round of applause, Lieutenant Colonel Vanyu, Lieutenant Colonel Marcio, Lieutenant Colonel Andrei, Major Jorge, Lieutenant Vinicius, and all of you who contributed directly and indirectly contributed, as well as Sergeant. Please stand up if you're in the audience. Sodre, his daughter, I forgot his name. Stand up, you also deserve the applause. Please, a round of applause for all of you. And to finish up, I couldn't leave out on behalf of the current General Director of the Department of Airspace Control, Lieutenant Brigadier Eduardo Barbacovi, who took the job today, and Colonel Aviator Edson, Commander of the CINDACTA 3. I'd like to thank, on behalf of the same, the presence of all of you, and may you make it home safely, and if God willing, in the next event, we'll have more topics, longer time, because the range of this kind of equipment is vast one. So thank you all, have enjoyed the day, and may Brazil win.
Agradecemos a presença de todos no evento e esperamos que tenham sido dias realmente inspiradores. Em 2023, o SIRESANT ocorrerá na cidade de Manaus, Amazonas, onde aguardaremos por todos vocês. Sentimos-nos honrados de anunciar que o Brasil foi escolhido para sediar a 6ª edição do Drone Enable em 2023, um evento de escala mundial promovido pela Organização da Aviação Civil Internacional. Acompanhe as mídias sociais do DECEA e da Força Aérea para mais informações. Está encerrado o simpósio sobre sistemas de aeronaves não tripuladas no ano de 2022. Defender, controlar, integrar. Força Aérea Brasileira, asas que protegem o país.